there's a connection that we all have to seafood. You know, we all have this connection to the blue planet.
Heavy metals and microplastics that are in the ocean. So can we bust this myth once and for all that wild caught is better?
There are sustainability issues. There's a supply and demand inequality that just doesn't work. Like if the whole world only asked for king salmon, we said we only want wild salmon from Alaska, we would deplete the quota in 16 days.
What are the fish that are generally the cleanest?
It's fish that are in the river systems or along the shorelines. You know, there's a lot of fish that go back and forth between rivers and oceans, you know, like
seafood superfoods, caviar being one of them. Say top 5. What are your favorite from a nutrient density and like unique compound standpoint?
I mean,
hi, I'm Dr. Will Cole. Wellness is a sacred art, and you are the masterpiece. This is the art of being well. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here.
My goodness, the pleasure's all mine. I can't believe we were at Eudaimonia and I didn't get to meet you in person. I apologize.
It's all good. There was so much really beautiful things happening and we were just circling, dancing around the perimeter, but here we are.
Everywhere I went, there was Seatopia. I mean, you were feeding thousands of people. How was that experience?
It's really beautiful to feel this community who cares so much about nutrition, wellness, really embracing whole food in this format. You know, it was really beautiful. You know, sometimes we, you know, because Seatopia isn't just about food, right? And it's not even just about seafood. It's how do you deliver the most bioavailable form of DHA and EPA in a certified clean manner. And sometimes that goes over people's heads, you know, like if we're, you know, in a seafood conference, for example, it doesn't really resonate. You know, people just think, how come your stuff's so expensive? But when we're there, it's like, show me the data. People want to see the certificate of analysis. They want to understand microalgae. It's just like, you know, we're in the church. It's good.
Yeah, preaching to the choir. Yeah. So, but yeah, you are the gold standard in seafood, and I'd love to uncover that and why I recommend you to our telehealth patients and beyond, people that listen to the podcast. So I'd love to start with you personally. How did you get into seafood, or how did seafood find you?
Well, you know, seafood there's a connection that we all have to seafood. You know, we all have this connection to the blue planet, right? Back to the origins of life. And it's so deep in our genetics. You know, we feel it when we are in the ocean. You know, there's this remembrance that happens. And I was so deep into my connection to ocean. I grew up around the ocean. I thought I was going to be a Shamu trainer at one point. Like that was like my path. So as a very youngster, I was volunteering at an aquarium, learning about how to maintain, you know, saltwater systems and cleaning and feeding moon jellies and all this. And I was introduced to the idea of regenerative aquaculture by the lead aquarist there. And he had this steelhead trout rehabilitation project demonstrating how we could breed steelhead trout and reintroduce them to the lakes and rivers and rehabilitate the ecosystem services that they provide. And if done right, we could also raise them to maturity and feed our community. And that concept was really the impetus or the seed that germinated many years later in what is today Seatopia, is how do we do things right in changing our relationship to the ocean. So I've been interested in this concept of regenerative aquaculture from the place of how do we evolve our relationship to the ocean for a very long time. But it took many years to get to the point where we actually could figure out how to do it in a financially sustainable way, because a lot of the economies of scale and doing it right are still developing, right? You know, there's many examples of industrial farm-raised seafood that's done poorly using subsidized commodity feeds. There's many examples of aquaculture that is still dependent on finite resources that are increasingly toxic, like our bait fish. But doing it well, doing it right with integrity is something that from that very young age, this inspiration was planted with me, and it took 30 years to figure out how to bring that vision to life. So I guess
it's beautiful. What do you feel? I mean, you mentioned kind of this ineffable connection that people have with the sea, whether they know it or not. There's this sort of healing aspect of it, this calming aspect of it, that oceans and large bodies of waters as a whole really speak to people on a deep somatic level. What do you think that is? Is it just we came from it at the dawn of creation without form or void? What's your guess?
Well, chemically we still have this element DHA, this molecule that is in our eyeballs. It's almost pure DHA and prefrontal cortex in our spine. Like DHA is such a building block to life still today. This essential fatty acid, it is essential. And still, where does it come from? It all comes from microalgae still today. Like you can get it from seafood, but where does a fish get it from? A fish doesn't create omega-3s. It gets it through its food system. They're literally accumulating or bioaccumulating it from microalgae. And so here we are, we've evolved as these humans that have an essential fatty acid that comes from the ocean. We still have that clear tie. And it's also just kind of worth kind of dwelling on this idea that sunlight became conscious through the creation of chlorophyll, becoming DHA, creating life. And still today, DHA is such a foundational building block of all of life, right? And it allows the transfer of energy to reflect and communicate. I think that connection is something that, we could wax poetically for a while on, but
that is a powerful way that you articulated. That is exactly how I feel. I've never heard someone say it exactly like that. I think that's what it is. It is that moment right there at the beginning of time on Earth, kind of that connection that we still need today, whether we realize it or not. There's something essential, meaning our body cannot make it on its own. We have to get it from the sea. Yeah. And isn't it wild too that what's this very low percentage, a few percentage points of the ocean mankind has only discovered, like 8% or something of the ocean. And it's wildly, we don't understand the tipping point or the tip of the iceberg, to use that horrible pun at this moment, of what the ocean has for us.
Yeah. There's so much still that we have to learn from this, and not to be doom and gloom about it, but every 40 minutes another species goes extinct. The ocean is this vital resource that regulates climate on the planet, that gives oxygen to the planet. And when we call this planet Earth, it's really a disservice. It's a lack of perspective, because as soon as you go into space, as soon as you go up, you realize this is the blue planet. And the blue planet gives value and recognition to the systems that it is, right? And if we could change our relationship to the blue planet, if we're going to live on this planet, we should figure out how to have good relation to the oceans, right? And we haven't really, we've extracted from the oceans in this industrial way for so long. The evolution of mankind is generally described as the transition from hunter-gatherers to farmers. And, the nuance is, how do we farm, right? And we can't just continue to extract. The gross production of wild-caught seafood on the planet plateaued in 2002. Like the total amount of fish that is pulled out of the ocean every year peaked, and it's plateaued since then, meaning they haven't found, even though there's more and more demand, there's not like a new resource that's been found. There's not like we can go further, we can go deeper to find more fish. There's not. Even though they're going into Arctic and fishing for krill, which is such a terrible idea to remove this foundational root chakra of the whole ocean, right? What this means is we have to learn how to raise seafood, change our relationship from extraction to cultivation, and do it in a way that's not just monoculture, but multiculture, polyculture, integrated multi-trophic aquaculture is what we call it technically in the marine biology world. This is the evolution, right? If we can have a relationship with the ocean where we symbiotically create life, the ocean can as she has done many times in the past, create such abundance. The oceans have created such vast abundance many times over eons. It's just in this more recent blip since humans developed large boats with spotter planes and sonar to capture incredible quantities that we've started removing biomass from the ocean to a point where we're beyond what is called sustainable yield. This evolution now has resulted in us needing to farm fish, but we need people to evolve their appreciation, understanding, and buying decisions to affect better choices. Because, we don't say that farmed chicken or beef is bad. We ask, how was it farmed? And therein lies the nuance. Like, we're not just going to continue to hunt buffalo. We already crossed that tipping point. We raise animals, and sometimes if we choose grass-fed, grass-finished, regenerative practices, we get healthier foods. And healthier foods invariably are better for the environment, better for people, better for the animals. And that's what we're trying to cultivate here with Seatopia, is this better buying decision, better education towards better practices.
We're going to dispel so many myths today. We're going to blow people's minds about the fishing industry, the seafood industry. Before we go into that, I wanted to unpack one other thing that you said, is that as a kid growing up, young man growing up, you wanted to be a Shamu trainer. I too was inspired by Free Willy. What is it? I mean, was it Free Willy specifically? Because I think that film for young guys specifically was like, yes, I want to be that kid.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had a really unique opportunity to spend time with orca, because my mom worked at SeaWorld, and every Thursday I would go to SeaWorld. My grandmother would drop me off, because we had short day in elementary school on Thursdays, and I would spend hours wandering around meeting the people that worked there. And through that process, I got some behind the scenes. I got to meet some of the people who worked there, some of the trainers, the dolphin trainers, whatnot, and I just thought they had the coolest job in the world. But being in the presence of a highly intelligent, large, sentient mammal is really powerful. I mean, since then I've also had the opportunity to swim with and spend time with orcas in the wild. I even played music for some orcas. I have it on video. I had a pod of orcas swimming next to me while I was on a paddleboard, being towed me on a boat with a drum at one point. I'm going way off tangent, but there's these animals, when you're near them, it's like being near a god. It's being near something so powerful and so intelligent. They are, there's something that's really hard to put into words, just being near them. And I think that's part of the reason why that so many people were moved by that movie Free Willy, and had an interesting experience being at SeaWorld. We've since come to understand how terrible it is to keep massive, sentient, highly intelligent creatures in a tiny pool, but I still give credit to the experience that was imparted on many people to actually just think more about the ocean, develop a relationship with the ocean and the creatures that are there.
100%. So you kind of dug into a little bit. I'd love to go deep here on the differences between wild caught and farm raised fish and seafood. Because look, it's always been the advice of people like me, people in the health space, historically, to go recommend wild caught. That was the advice: wild caught fish, wild caught seafood. But I changed my opinion over the years of what it does to the ocean, and also the health of the ocean, and actually what fish can have if there's not third-party testing of what's going on here. Just because it's wild caught, they could have lots of, for lack of good words for it, just these gnarly health problems as fish are concerned. Parasites too, heavy metals and microplastics that are in the ocean. So can we bust this myth once and for all that wild caught is better?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. It's not black and white. There are examples where, if you have a direct relationship and you feel confident that it's done well, by all means, it feels so good to support a direct relationship with something that is also like deeply ingrained in our history, our culture. It's romantic, right? We have this romantic tie to the ocean and fishing, but there are sustainability issues. There's a supply and demand inequality that just doesn't work. Like if the whole world only asked for wild-caught seafood, we would, in particular, wild-caught king salmon. We said we only want wild salmon from Alaska. We would deplete the quota in 16 days. Like it doesn't suffice, right? What are we going to do the rest of the year? We have to develop different methodologies. And then you layer on the issues with microplastics that are ubiquitous. You can't test a fish in the ocean and not find microplastics. From the bottom of the Marianas Trench to the top of the Himalayas, there's microplastics. And mercury today is 300% higher in the oceans than it was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, because we continue to put coal-fired plants up into the atmosphere, or their effluent or emissions go into the atmosphere. It comes down in rain into the rivers and into the oceans, and it bioaccumulates. Microplastics are showing up in the livers and the digestive tracts, but mercury goes right into the fatty tissue, right? And then it bioaccumulates as larger organisms are consuming it. Speaking of orcas, there's a lot of concern amongst the marine biology community that the levels of heavy metals and PFAS are affecting their ability to procreate. Because as you get to the top of the food chain, and they're at the very top, you see such toxic levels that it's inhibiting their ability to continue to exist as a species. And so, and you mentioned parasites. Parasites are just another issue that you have to be mindful of, and we can get into all that, but we should also address that it's not black and white with wild caught and farm raised. Just because it's farm raised doesn't mean it's good or bad. Just because it's wild caught doesn't mean it's good or bad. People can say like, oh, I only want line caught fish, but line caught is also super generic. You gotta get into the nuance, like how long was that line and how many hooks were on that line, because a very common methodology for catching wild caught fish is called long lining, in which you can have multiple mile long lines with thousands of hooks baited and sitting there waiting for any fish to come along. And anytime you get to such massive scale and variability, it's exceptionally difficult to be specific in the species and size of fish you're targeting. So the bycatch is a massive issue. So there's so many ways.
And I think that's
there's just so
what's
many
so
ways
good here is for us to
go for it.
Yeah, what's so good here is for us to really bring the context and nuance versus just being reductive and saying wild caught is good, farm raised is bad. It's okay, both. There's good problems with both, but what I love about the things we can control and really be supportive of regenerative, sustainable practices is in farm raised fish when done properly. You mentioned line caught, trolling. Can you talk about what these terms even mean and why people should be mindful of them as far as sustainability is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's just like we can do a whole episode just on the myriad ways in which industrial fishing is greenwashed. But line caught is something that you have to watch out for as far as long line, right? Is it a single line and a single hook, right? How many hooks are on that line? Trolling is bottom trawling, for example, is absolutely terrible. I'll give you apples to apples example. We have these beautiful sushi-grade scallops that we sell through Seatopia, and they're microplastic tested, zero detectable microplastics, mercury tested, and truly regenerative, meaning every single scallop that is grown in a hatchery and then put into the lantern baskets grown in the ocean is having a direct regenerative impact on the environment quantifiably. They are simply cleaning the ocean because they're filter feeders, and they are sequestering carbon from the atmosphere because we have an issue called ocean acidification, 11 pounds of scallop shells is literally 1 pound of carbon that gets pulled out of the ocean. Not to make this a like sustainability carbon story, but it is benefiting the environment when we grow scallops. It also benefits the environment when we grow seaweed. Conversely, wild-caught scallops caught on a bottom trawl are literally dragging a massive metal rake along the ocean floor, disrupting the sea floor, which would be equivalent to just going through the rainforest with a bulldozer to try to catch, to collect mushrooms. It's a very destructive way to catch fish or scallops, and it shouldn't be condoned. We should be doing things better. We can. Just because nobody's watching doesn't mean that it's not extremely disruptive to the environment. And we can support actual solutions. We have solutions like regenerative raised scallops. Beautiful. And then you can put scallops and kelp, seaweed, integrated with fish farms, and you have this beautiful symbiotic relationship, because fish poop, effluent, is a beautiful fertilizer. There's no such thing as waste in nature, right? As long as your inputs are clean, there's a symbiotic relationship between the effluent of fish and the nutrients that the kelps and the filter feeders are looking for. You can create new habitat. So literally ammonia, nitrates, phosphorus that's coming from the fish poop becomes this superfood fertilizer for seaweeds and for deposit filters and filter feeders. When you have these relationships, you start to create these integrated multi-trophic systems. This is polyculture. This is regenerative aquaculture, where the presence of this farm can have a positive impact on the environment, cleaning the water, creating habitat, quantified by increased levels of oxygen, increased levels of biodiversity, increased levels of wild fish in the environment because of the presence of these types of regenerative aquaculture projects.
Wow. How, even into today's day and age, with all that we know that's going on in the world with our food supply and the planet, how is trolling still legal? I mean, and maybe is it difficult to police or pass laws in international waters? What's the state of making these unsustainable practices in the ocean a thing of the past?
That's a question I have a hard time answering. It gets into politics and money and things like that. And out of sight, out of mind,
Yeah.
That's,
right.
A lot of people who got into marine biology and this course of trying to be good stewards of the ocean, they're kind of waiting for government to regulate things to create better situations. And I'm a big believer that, hey, let's just vote with our forks. And if we have a community of people who care enough about better choices, we can affect change today. We don't have to wait for 20 years or 7 years from now when this new government policy is going to be put into effect. Right now we can change our choices. And the reality is, sometimes sustainability just doesn't move the needle for people, right? I've been in this space for 12 years now, and it was for 6 years I was pushing a ball uphill trying to tell people that these specific solutions to raising fish in a more sustainable way are better for the planet, better for the animals, and better for the environment. And we, other than some awards and applause, we weren't actually crushing it on a growth phase. A lot of that flipped though when my wife became pregnant, and she asked me, hey, of all these different projects we're working with, which ones are the cleanest that I can eat when I'm pregnant? Which ones have the lowest levels of mercury so that I can feel confident eating it every day? Which ones have microplastics, which ones don't? And we had a lot of this data, but all of a sudden I realized that what matters to her matters probably to a lot of people. And what we did at that moment was we started putting that data front and center transparently. And we honestly had to remove a couple of the projects we were working with from our category, because if it didn't meet the standard of can a pregnant mama eat this 3 times a day, 7 days a week? Then we shouldn't be selling it. If there's any levels of detectable microplastics, we shouldn't be selling it. And we've learned so much about this. And the most beautiful part about this is we're bringing more impact to the projects that are part of the solution today by focusing on health, because people really care about that, like underlying, like the systems that create healthier foods are also creating healthier environmental impact. Nutrient density
perfectly
is
said.
Yeah, the nutrient density is a direct relation to that ocean environment.
Yeah, isn't that the human condition, right? I mean, when you talk about these sort of nebulous law, unless you're an environmentalist and really know this stuff, it seems sort of other, right? It's not going to affect me. It's this larger thing, or I don't have any power on that. So we kind of feel powerless. But voting with your forks and making it a personal of knowing, hey, nutrient density and the things we're talking about that are bad for the planet are also not good for us, and we're part of nature. It's really one and the same. But making it personal raises awareness, and it's like, okay, this is going to impact me on a selfish level, but also open people's minds up, I think, to the larger conversation. So let's go there. I mean, you mentioned these microplastics and heavy metals that are within seafood. Where is it coming from, and what fish and what seafood are the worst offenders if not tested properly, making sure you're getting clean sources?
Yeah. Well, some of the worst are going to be, if we're looking at mercury levels, further up the food chain, we kind of reflected on that. But another thing just to look at is the ratio of mercury to selenium, because it's interesting if you look at sort of where are the worst offenders of mercury selenium ratios, and it's these large pelagic fish. And evolutionarily, we didn't actually have access to these big pelagic fish. Like, we didn't have poke chains on every corner where you could just go eat ahi poke every day. These are big pelagic fish that live in the ocean. We evolved eating a lot of the fish along the shorelines, and the selenium ratios are much higher and the mercury levels much lower in those species. So our bodies need that connection to mercury and selenium to be able to toxify any naturally occurring levels of mercury that are in fish. You also have higher levels of mercury today, so that's complicating it. But specific examples are things like swordfish. Swordfish has very low levels of selenium and a lot of mercury. And so our bodies just didn't evolve having access to that on a daily basis, right? Large tuna is another example. High levels of mercury, relative levels of selenium. As you get smaller on the tuna, it's not as big of an issue, but it's still there. Microplastics is another issue, though. Like, microplastics are ubiquitous across the food chain. So you have to look at the biology. So where are those microplastics sitting? So I used to love taking whole shrimp, shell on, cooking them, take the shells, sometimes eat the shell, if they're like cooked perfectly, like crispy, you could eat the shell, but otherwise you just make a broth with them and you make this beautiful, like really shrimpy broth, and you can use it in your bisques or in your ramen. I don't do that anymore, because through testing, we test a lot of fish from all around the world. We found that the biology of shrimp is that they're putting the microplastics, they're filtering the microplastics, and then it's accumulating in the shells. So now we recommend people don't make the broth with the microplastic shells. It's just not a good idea. We don't currently sell any oysters or mussels because the digestive tract is intact. You're eating the digestive tract, and the filter feeders, the bivalves, are filtering a lot of the microplastics, and it's right there in that digestive tract. However, an exception is scallops, because scallops, we can sell just the adductor muscle. So you can get a scallop with just that beautiful medallion. That's the adductor muscle, and the roe has been removed. It's very easy to remove that, unlike with a mussel or a oyster. It's very difficult to remove just the digestive tract. But with a scalp, you can get that beautiful adductor muscle, and we can test it consistently. 0 microplastics there in the roe and the digestive tract, microplastics. Fish generally have pretty good livers, and you will occasionally see levels of microplastics that will pass that membrane, but it's not nearly as common. It's more common in the digestive tract. So like I used to eat livers. Like you can do beautiful things with the tataki on the liver. The levels of omegas and DHA in the fish livers are incredible. But if you're trying to avoid microplastics, it's something that we don't recommend anymore. You know, it's different.
Wow.
And microplastics are also, just worth noting, very different in the ocean than they are on land. You know, like land-based clean microplastics that came off of like a plastic bottle, yeah, you probably shouldn't be consuming them intentionally, but it's very different than a microplastic that's been degrading in the ocean for very long periods of time and then absorbing, because the way the structure is, it's absorbing and attracting other chemicals. And when we test the microplastics found in the ocean, they're always paired with these other PFAS and other things, because they're absorbing it, they're breaking it down, and it creates a disaster in your system, which is very different than just a clean, intact microplastic. So ocean-based microplastics are much more insidious than
detrimental
land-based microplastics. Yeah.
Wow, you're teaching me so much. It makes complete sense of when you think about the whole process of what's happened to that plastic over time within the ocean. And just to make sure that I understand this right, there are no mussels or oysters that fit your criteria of cleanliness, of purity.
It's possible it exists, but we haven't, like, what we do with Seatopia is, like, we're trying to build a scalable source and solution, and it's possible that somebody else has it out there, but we haven't found it, something that we can build a business on, you know, like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to.
I hear what you're saying.
These generalistic statements, but we don't have access to anything that we haven't come across it.
Yeah, from a sustainability, scalability, like feeding more people, maybe some small niche, whatever.
I hope so.
But yeah,
I have to be optimistic that there's a place where you can, you know, have clean water, filtering the water, clean environment. Yes, I believe it's possible, but I don't have.
Okay.
Yeah,
but scallops, because of the way that you're eating it, it's not a problem.
Yeah, you're just not eating the digestive tract, the liver, the digestive tract, the filtration systems. When you eat the scallop, that beautiful medallion is just an adductor muscle. It's not the integrated anatomy that has a digestive system like an oyster or mussel, where it's all kind of together.
Yeah, and you mentioned, again, another beautiful way of saying this is that humans for thousands and thousands of years would have been along the shoreline having these proper, like, higher selenium, lower mercury, or no mercury levels, these smaller fish on the food chain. What are those fish? Like today, what are the fish that are generally the cleanest, and certainly if they're from Seatopia, they are?
Well, in particular with, you know, the fish that we evolved eating, it's just smaller fish, or fish that are in the river systems or along the shorelines. You know, there's a lot of fish that go back and forth between rivers and oceans, you know, like salmon, trout, like so many species that we're not, like halibut, like, you know, a lot of these species go from saltwater up into the estuaries, into the river systems to lay their eggs, and they go back and forth. And it's a really important part of nutrient cycling and all this. But these would have been the fish that we had access to evolutionarily, you know. These are the fish that have the balanced ratio that we evolved and have this system, this liver system that we've evolved to be able to handle. Still today, you know, I would say, you know, within Seatopia, we have, you know, the reason why Seatopia products are clean is not just because of the size. It has more to do with the feed and mitigating exposure to heavy metals. So an example was, there was a farm that we were working with for a while that was using anchoveta byproduct, or a small fish. The byproduct was small fish. Like they were taking a fish that they would grind up, a small fish that they would grind up and turn into a fish meal, and they would feed that to these larger fish. And that was one source of the protein that they were getting. for some reason, I think because the access to that species was impacted from one year to the next, they switched to a different source for their fish meal protein. And that fish source was a local MSC certified fishery and they were using the byproduct of this other local MSC certified fishery. And they thought that was great. It's more local, it's circular, etc. And when we received that next lot and it got tested for mercury, the levels of mercury had gone up 4x. And we had to dig deeper and find out, well, what happened? What changed? This doesn't meet our standards anymore. Come to find out that the species that they chose is tuna. Like they didn't choose, but they did essentially. Their feed now used tuna byproduct, MSC certified local tuna byproduct, which they thought would be great. Impact the flavor, impact the omegas, but because there's higher levels of mercury in that fish, feeding that to the fish over the course of the 2 years it took from the grout resulted in 4 times higher levels of mercury instead of simply giving them a smaller fish. So depending on just how large the fish is and how high up on the food chain it is, can make a very, very big difference in the cumulative exposure that happens over the course of their life. So with Seatopia, like our favorite farm partners are not even utilizing fish meal and fish oil. Like we today are selling beautiful rainbow trout that are raised without any fish in them, in their feed. So it's a predatory fish being raised on microalgae and insect protein and a couple other vegetable and nut-based proteins, for example, pistachios and things like that. It's incredible that you can build food systems for a beautiful fish and do it without resources like corn and soy and without fish and fish meal. If we do this right, we can literally raise healthy, nutrient-rich, fish-free feeds that do not negatively impact the environment. And this is an example that we can do it today. It still requires economies of scale, but as a result of this project, we have demonstrated that A, it can be done, B, it's clean, and C, it's higher levels of DHA and EPA than even a wild-caught species because you can concentrate the amount of DHA in the feed through the microalgae. Microalgae can be raised in industrial fermentation systems in a very clean, very scalable, regenerative impact way that results in elevated levels of the primary nutrients that increase the immune response in fish, gives them a healthier microbiome, and results in true superfoods.
Yeah. And for people that don't know, we're talking about microplastics and forever chemicals or PFAS. For people that don't know, what is that doing to be consuming these on a consistent basis, this bioaccumulation that you talk about, this sort of slow accumulation in the body, what's it associated with in the research as far as human health concerns?
I mean, if we talked about heavy metals, it generally is affecting, it's associated with things like dementia, it's brain fog, all sorts of complications there. There's a lot of mental issues with increased heavy metals, specifically from methyl mercury. The microplastics and the PFAS are endocrine disrupting and affecting, even like there was a study recently highlighting increased connection of cardiovascular impacts related to the presence of microplastics. And it goes on and on. I don't want to paint too much of a scare tactic here, but it is important to avoid exposure to these things. Yes, your body can detoxify some of these things. You can detoxify heavy metals with selenium, with sauna, with all these things that you can proactively help your body. But if you have prolonged exposure to heavy metals, it's exceptionally detrimental. And yet you can also just choose something that doesn't have heavy metals. Like we have access, like every day in our home we eat beautiful sushi-grade seafood. I feed it to my children. I feel like I can give them something that not only is clean but is healthy for them, right? Like I can choose something that's richer in omega-3, selenium, vitamin D, and healthy and sushi grade. They can get it in the most bioavailable format. when my wife was pregnant, she didn't supplement with omega-3 capsules. She ate sushi every day. And when my kids were born, I was able to give them salmon roe caviar, the absolute superfood of the entire oceans, right? Like there's no more beautiful food on the planet than salmon roe caviar when it's certified clean, zero detectable microplastics, delivered with this trust of sushi-grade quality. Like we super freeze everything, bringing everything down to negative 76 degrees, delivered on dry ice with a thermometer. That's a guarantee in the supply chain and the quality controls that allowed me to, coupled with the certificate of analysis and knowing what was in the feed, to give this pure nutrition to my children and to my wife throughout, multiple pregnancies. And I love being able to do that. I love that I can give them something that they can assimilate and they feel strong. And there's clear evidence that mothers who had high levels of DHA and have children with higher IQs, like 5 points higher, and then another multiple points if they continued feeding it to them when the children were born. Like it's just one of the most important things that we should be doing.
Totally. You're going to, without a doubt, feel the difference for yourself, or if you're feeding your kids, like you're building these neurons, you're building on a cellular level with these nutrient dense foods, without a doubt. You mentioned tuna. People love their tuna, chicken of the sea. Like, what should people know about the tuna world and what you think about it?
You can make beautiful equivalents with something else. Like we take yellowtail and we poach it in olive oil and put it in a jar, and it's gorgeous. It's so beautiful. It's so much better than anything somebody can get in a can. You can do that at home, and you know that you're not part of the system that's condoning the destruction of the ocean, and you're not being exposed to levels of mercury. Like, yes, you can get some tuna that are smaller, but do you really trust all the transparency there, or do you want the exposure? Yes, you can eat a bunch more Brazilian nuts to offset it, for sure. And if you're in a situation where cost is the most important thing, and just make sure you're getting that selenium and balancing that, and have an active detoxification protocol. But it's really clear that we didn't evolve having access to these large pelagic fish, and that accumulation of heavy metals over time is detrimental to your mental health. And
yeah, well said. Okay, so you mentioned some of your favorite seafood superfoods, caviar being one of them. Would that be, if we had to say top 5, what are your favorite from a nutrient density and like unique compound standpoint?
I mean, the salmon roe caviar is so beautiful because a lot of fish, when they're born, like a pelagic fish in particular, when they're born, immediately they have to go and eat something. Whereas a salmon, he's born and he still has this roe sac attached to him, and he can live for 30 days on that roe sac. There's so much nutrients in there. So when we're eating that, we're just getting, like, the salmon put so much love into ensuring that their offspring had a solid foundation, and you can literally eat that. You can eat that. It's like eating eggs can be superfoods, right? Like, not all foods are medicine, but food can be medicine when it's clean and nutrient dense. And clean salmon roe caviar is absolutely one of those things. I think another one just that I like bringing up is just microalgae in general. Like, when we feed microalgae to like our steelhead trout, like they can result in higher levels of DHA than we've seen. And the same thing, we have this Branzino farm that is, when you take the skin off, it looks like somebody just poured olive oil on it because it's so beautifully oily, right? And that is just the microalgae DHA, right? But so I like taking, I like just acknowledging that you can also eat microalgae, whether that's, Schizocrytia, which is the species that we use for developing a lot of the large-scale microalgae oils. It was actually originally identified as by NASA as the microalgae that's most likely to be able to produce proteins and fats for humans in space. But today we use it in aquaculture to feed fish the healthiest diets. But the steelhead trout's another beautiful example. And you can eat, spirulinas and the chlorellas and the astaxanthins. Those are all exceptional examples of seafoods that are pure superfoods. And if you don't want to eat those, we can give you a beautiful piece of sushi-grade salmon or steelhead or branzino that was fed a diet of microalgae. And there's these beautiful pro-resolving mediators that result in us being able to even more efficiently digest it than had we just eaten the microalgae directly. So,
yeah, so cool. And it's can you talk about astaxanthin for a moment? And there's these carotenoids that gives it the bright color, and why that's important from a health standpoint.
Yeah, astaxanthin is one of my favorites. When astaxanthin is produced from a red algae, or it's actually a green algae, right? And when exposed to stress, like you see it sometimes in tide pools, there's this green algae along the edges, and then at low tide it turns red because it's creating this carotenoid to protect itself from sun damage. This oxidative stress response creates this carotenoid. It's also what gives shrimp their color, because they're eating these algae and they're accumulating this carotenoid. It's what ends up giving flamingos their red color. It's what gives salmon their red color. So when we include it in the feed for salmon, it also is imparting that beautiful color. It is an antioxidant. It's one of the strongest antioxidants on the planet. So it's a food supplement that has a color impact on animals, including salmon, steelhead, and us. I actually take it both internally and topically. There's a beautiful skin salve for sun resiliency that I put on my skin, on my face, and whenever I'm in the ocean, actually almost every single day. And it's also, what's in our fish. So the ability for this microalgae to survive in the sunlight at low tide is what also, has that solar resistance, what also, benefits us. A lot of people take it as a sort of like a natural internal sun screen. I don't want to say sunscreen because that's not the right word. It's more like a solar resiliency. But yeah, astaxanthin is beautiful.
Solar that's a good way of putting it. And the fish that have the highest levels of that, I guess it's depending on what they're fed. But from a Seatopia standpoint, which ones would you say have these compounds in the highest amounts?
You just see it. It's really easy to see just by the color, right? So the dark red ones have more astaxanthin. Like there are salmon that are ivory colored. Like ivory salmon is a thing in nature. They just are eating a diet that didn't have as much astaxanthin in it. Whereas, the degradation of color is directly impacted by what they are exposed to. You have pink salmon, you have silver salmon, you have ivory salmon, you have king salmon. And in aquaculture, there are some examples where people are using astaxanthin from yeast, but astaxanthin from microalgae literally gives them the exact nutrients that they would get in nature that is benefiting their health. And it comes in, you can get it in the flesh, right? Like you can literally have higher levels of antioxidants in the raw seafood you're consuming when it's part of their diet.
These omega fatty acids, specifically the EPA and DHA, but the long chain form of these omega fatty acids, many people don't know, and especially for the more plant-based vegan vegetarians out there, can you kind of break that down of why the ocean sources, whether it's seafood or algae, are so important because of the bioavailability versus getting just a flax oil or some sort of seed oil that's omega? It's not the same to our body, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of fats, right? So in the long chain fatty acid criteria, we have ALA, for example, that you can get a lot of in chia seeds. The calculation is you'd have to eat, like if you made chia pudding, you have to eat 24 ounces of chia pudding to get the equivalent amount of DHA that you'd get in 2 ounces of sushi-grade Seatopia salmon, for example. And it's not that there's not DHA in there. It's just that there's none. Your body has to convert it, and your body can convert it, but just so happens that conversion rate's like 1%. EPA is a little bit better. It's like 10% conversion ratio, but you just get it from the fish. And you could get it, again, just from eating microalgae, but you actually get some of these other pro-resolving mediators that your body evolved looking for, to be able to quickly digest it when you eat whole fish. Whole fish in that clean format is something that I think we evolutionarily have been doing for a very long time. Plant-based is different, like for a mama who's breastfeeding, right? Like, children need that DHA. They're looking for it, DHA is highly present in breast milk. If a mother doesn't have a rich source of DHA, whether she's supplementing or just simply eating like really clean seafood, she's not going to be, her body can convert some of it, but based on those conversion ratios, it's very inconvenient at best to imagine that you'd get it just from plant sources.
Yeah. And I think I don't want to devolve into this conversation about plant-based, but to me, it's always been that point right there is one of the main ones. When you look at it from an ancestral health, like what we adapted as humans, it's right there. When you talk about bioavailability and nutrient density, what our body needs. We need these things, and they're only really from a few sources, and they're from the sea, specifically fish, unless you're going to forage for algae, and maybe some tribes throughout human history did that. Yeah. But really, there's not like a healthy indigenous culture that didn't have seafood or something that had some other animal source that had these compounds in it. And I think this is another massive myth that I think we're able to bust today, because there's so much fear and stigma around seafood and pregnant moms, pregnant women. And what you're able to do with Seatopia, sort of the level of purity, is that this is not only pregnancy safe, it's pregnancy recommended as far as I'm concerned for these growing babies and mom.
Yeah. I mean, look, everybody is going to be unique and have a different response, and they should consult their doctor, what their specific situation is. But we see a lot of people coming to Seatopia referred from their functional medicine doctor that say, hey, my mercury levels were high, my omega index was low. They said Seatopia is the solution because they could get the certificate analysis verified clean seafood, and I need to increase my omegas and I need to mitigate exposure to mercury. You can do that. Like, we have a lot of customers who will send us a screenshot of their function health biomarkers from when they first joined to even just like 30, 60, 90 days later. Like, there's dramatic changes simply by changing what you're eating. Instead of eating tuna, you're eating Seatopia, and the mercury levels come down because your body actually proactively detoxifies when you have this beautiful access to DHA and selenium. Your body needs that, right? It's part of it. And the parasites is something that a lot of people are concerned about with eating sushi-grade seafood or even seafood in general, right? But the FDA has this thing called the Parasite Destruction Protocol. Their guidelines on anything that's being served raw, it needs to go through the Parasite Destruction Protocols, and you'll see it like in small print on a menu, like when you order oysters or whatever. And what it says is anything that's being served raw should be super frozen before served. And their definition of super frozen is it has to be stored at a temperature below 30 degrees, negative 30 degrees for, I think it's 72 hours or longer. With Seatopia, we bring it down to negative 76 degrees, and we keep it frozen for a long time. And so not only are we hitting that, there's an exception to the rule that the FDA has defined. The FDA's Parasite Destruction Protocol says it needs to be super frozen at these temperatures for this long, or it needs to be raised in a clean aquaculture environment with certified parasite-free feed. So we're hitting oftentimes 2 levels of assurance, and then we deliver it to you with a thermometer. Every box has a thermometer in the delivery, and if it arrives and it's not frozen, we replace it. That thermometer tells you that it was maintained at temperature throughout. So unlike going to a market where it's sitting out fresh and you don't actually know how long it's been fresh, like that's the big concern. Like, how long has it been fresh? Was it previously sitting out and then they froze it and then they put it out again? Has it been fresh for 2 days, 3 days? does it smell fishy? Like, fish shouldn't smell fishy. Like, have you ever been to the ocean and you're like, oh my gosh, it smells so fishy? Or, the fish doesn't smell fishy. That is a telltale sign of the oxidation of those long chain fatty acids. They are becoming oxidized, and that is the smell. If a pregnant mama is considering eating something sushi and it smells fishy, don't do it. Anybody, don't eat fishy fish. You shouldn't ever have that association, and you'll never have that experience with Seatopia if that's something you want to avoid at all costs, is anything smelling fishy. It shouldn't have that. The miroir of the ocean is what you should get.
Wow, so good. Great point. Another myth busted is the sort of oxidation of these omegas, the oxidation of these amine compounds that can happen, and it's not supposed to smell fishy. Something that I was reading in preparation for our conversation today was the kelp that you all have planted in as a part of this regenerative aquaculture. Can you talk about that and why that's important?
It's important because from a mission, we really want to have a regenerative impact on the planet. And we did it just as a part of our commitment to doing that. There's a lot of things that we're doing that I think are bettering the planet. But that one was really cool because you can literally count the 20,000 kelp plants that we planted, and now we've started a mangrove project in Indonesia. So we just want to have a direct corollary growth of restorative practices, because kelp forests are like the nurseries of the temperate oceans. Inside of a kelp forest, you'll see small fish going in there and hiding from big fish. Big fish go in there and lay their eggs, and it's like the nursery and spawning grounds. It's where biodiversity happens in the ocean. And since El Nino 6-8 years ago, a lot of the kelp forests in temperate waters around the world sort of disappeared because the water got so warm it kind of shocked the system, and a lot of them died. So we're working with marine biologists to identify and selectively breed sporophytes that are more resilient to warming conditions, and trying to put those back out into the water. So that's just one of the projects that we're doing. We're also this mangrove thing is also really cool, to reforest mangroves and create more habitat that is good for the environment.
I don't know about this. Teach me about mangroves.
Mangroves are in this tidal environment around more tropical places around the world, and they store incredible amounts of carbon, but perhaps even more importantly, they're the nurseries. So they have this beautiful root structure where it's like half in the air, half underwater, and fish will swim in between these root systems, and they create all this beautiful little habitat to hide. And so whether it's shrimp or scallops or oysters or mussels or baby sharks, there's so many species, little tiny hammerheads, all these species are living in there when they're small. And a lot of mangroves around the world have been removed due to rising sea levels, due to deforestation, due to industrial shrimp farming, and due to real estate. But the mangrove forests play a very important role in cleaning, because they're also cleaning and holding nutrients, preventing runoff. They also are a storm shelter, like a storm surge protector during things like hurricanes and typhoons. That they absorb a lot of that wave energy. They're just vital ecosystems. They're some of the most vital ecosystems on the planet. Kelp, mangroves, and coral reefs are exceptionally important ecosystems for the blue planet. And so we're working to rehabilitate some of those in Indonesia, part of this mangrove reforestation black tiger shrimp project that we're doing, to actually raise shrimp in what's called extensive aquaculture systems, where the shrimp, this endemic species of shrimp, are literally just released into these mangrove forests. You don't feed them anything. They're just eating zooplankton and phytoplankton until they're large enough to harvest, and under full moon they swim into these tide pools where they're kind of self-harvested, and that resource gives these communities like another reason to protect the forests and more source of income. And when they're raised this way, as opposed to like intensive aquaculture systems where they're being fed soy protein, etc., and antibiotics and hormones, these shrimp are, according to the lab tests, higher in DHA and EPA, and can be absolutely beautiful, clean, free of the things that you need. And the way that we do them, there's no chemicals, no like sodium bicarbonates and chlorides and whatnot in there. It's just chemical free, beautiful as it should be. And they're protecting the mangrove forest.
You were doing God's work for sure. I mean, and just to be clear on a functional medicine side, for people to know about nutrient density here, whether you're pregnant or not, whether you have a young baby that's had the growing nervous system development, brain development or not, every human being needs these omega fats specifically for your brain health. Every cell of your body needs it, from a cell membrane health, your hormone health, your heart health, your immune health. All these things are what we're talking about and why you should care, and getting it in its whole food form. Yeah. And selenium, which you mentioned from a detoxification standpoint, and many other, thyroid hormone health and beyond, why we need these trace minerals that are so rich, and the compounds, the astaxanthin compounds. It's just nature's multivitamin in so many ways that you're getting these nutrient dense foods. And another thing that I wanted to make a point for everybody, you hear me talking about in the podcast for years about regenerative farming and how it's good for the planet, but it's also good for us. This is what we're talking about here with regenerative aquaculture. It is good for the planet, but it's in turn increased nutrient density for you all when you're feeding yourselves and your family. My friend, before we go, the podcast, it's called The Art of Being Well. At the end, we do your art of being well. First question is, what's the worst tasting healthy food that you eat? You can appreciate it, you can respect it, but you're not doing it for the taste, you're doing it for the nutrient density of it.
Oh, I got the best one, noni. Have you ever had fermented noni?
Yes, it's like putrid.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you describe it?
Vomit and poop. The only reason I will consume it is because there's some incredible data showing it's like really healthy for humans. Like some of the aunties in Hawaii where I live, they swear that it cures everything. Fermented noni, check it out.
Do you take, focusing on nutrient density with seafood and microalgae and noni, do you take supplements? And if so, like what are maybe 2 lesser known supplements that you take?
I take astaxanthin, chlorella, spirulina daily, and also some magnesium.
Love it. Where's somewhere in the world that you haven't been to that is on your bucket list to visit one day?
Antarctica.
Nice. Me too. I want to go to it. Where's somewhere that you have been to in the world that's magical and it should be on other people's bucket list?
The Galapagos.
Nice. What's the weirdest, most out of the box, unconventional thing you've done for your wellness that you're willing to admit on a podcast?
I guess it depends. Convention's one of those funny things. I could say
it's relative.
Microdosing for some people is like out there, but in some communities it's totally cool. So I guess it depends on who's talking. Psychedelic mushrooms. I'll just throw it out there.
That's a good answer. What do you think of the emerging research around it and it just becoming more normal as I think beyond the sort of fringe world? It's now in medical settings around the world. What's your thoughts of it?
I think, we are spiritual beings and we can learn so much from plants, and this is just one plant that is speaking to us. I think it's really important to sit with plants, and that's like a really beautiful way to learn and tap in. And I think think it has had profound impacts on a lot of people, like all things, set and setting, there's no one chemical or plant that is, appropriate for everybody, but in the right setting with the right environment and in the right dose, dose is really important too. Like dose is kind of everything, right?
For sure. What is a conspiracy out there that you know to be true?
A conspiracy that I know to be true. Is the aquatic ape a conspiracy, or is that just a hypothesis?
Wait, I want to know what is the aquatic ape? Tell me all about it.
Oh, the aquatic ape hypothesis that a lot of people are familiar with the savanna ape. We came out of the trees to start.
Oh, I get it. What you're saying.
The aquatic ape is that we spent years actually, like mermaids in the ocean, in the estuaries that are webbing. Some people have more webbing than others. Is vestibular from a period of time. We still have these. We can excrete salt. When we sweat, we have this thing called the mammalian dive reflex, where when we go underwater, our heart rate slows down. And it's not across all mammals. We can we can release additional oxygen out of our white blood cells after a certain period of time exposure. So the aquatic ape hypothesis is kind of like a conspiracy for some people, but David Attenborough is a big believer, and so am I.
That's a great answer. It's a great answer for the founder of Seatopia, for sure.
It also has an interesting connection, though, to the development of our prefrontal cortex. So that's kind of the indisputed part, is that that aquatic ape was going to the shoreline to collect a source of protein that wasn't fighting back, like shellfish, oysters, mussels, and the introduction of high levels of DHA and EPA at that period of time in evolution is what allowed for the development of the prefrontal cortex. And the theory goes on to say that it also is like the community gathering is helped develop communication and all these other things. But some people don't like it because they prefer to hunt buffalo.
That's such a great answer. And if David Attenborough believes it, count me in.
Right on.
I mean, he's one of my heroes. My friend, where do people go to learn more about your work? Tell them all the things.
We have a funny URL, seatopia.fish, Fish. I love that URL. It's pretty easy to remember. Seatopia.fish, and we're on all the socials at Seatopia. And I think they can go to / the Will Cole.
Yeah, I have it. No, I'll give it to him right now. It's seatopia.fish /TABW for the art of being well. So seatopia.fish /TABW, and tell them I thank you guys for doing this for all the listeners, but they get something really cool if they go there.
They get pure superfoods. They're going to get free caviar, the salmon roe caviar, free when they use that link. So, I mean, you can experience these beautiful bites. I mean, if but like that little pop of oceanic goodness, that little bit of merroir with the pop and the crispness, it's just such a beautiful experience. And you can eat it raw, you can just do caviar bumps, and you can put it on sushi or on your eggs or anything. It's a really beautiful way to consume your DHA in the most bioavailable format, and it's more fun than supplements.
So for sure more fun than supplements. You get so much more. You cannot mimic nature like this.
No.
So again, it's seatopia.fish /TABW. Guys, you get receive a free caviar with your first purchase. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming on and sharing all the wisdom you have.
Thank you for taking time to speak about this. I think it's a very important subject, and I'm glad you're a curious human and willing to share these stories. Thank you.